I'd be happy to meet. 3 days later, she sat in Marcus Holt's downtown office, 50 floors above Seattle. Holt was taller than she expected, with silver hair and expensive clothes. He smiled warmly as he shook her hand, but his eyes were calculating. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I'll be direct. My company has experienced some setbacks recently due to code compliance issues. I'm told you're one of the best in the city at navigating these regulations. Sarah kept her expression neutral. I try to help my clients build responsibly. Exactly what I need. Holt leaned back in his chair. I'm launching a major project in the Columbia City neighborhood. Mixed-use development, affordable housing component, community spaces. It's important to me that this one goes smoothly. I'd like you to review all our plans and ensure we're beyond reproach on every code requirement. Sarah recognized the neighborhood name. Columbia City was gentrifying rapidly. A Holt development there would displace many long-time residents. But she also recognized an opportunity. I'd need complete access, she said. All plans, all contractor information, all communications with the city. I won't put my name on something unless I can verify everything personally. Of course, Holt said smoothly. Total transparency. Sarah knew he was lying. Men like Holt always had secrets. But if she was inside his company, even temporarily, she could learn things no amount of outside research could reveal. I'll do it, she said. But I have conditions. My recommendations must be followed, or I withdraw my involvement. And my contract states clearly that I have no liability for any plans or practices that existed before my review. Agreed. Holt extended his hand. As Sarah shook it, she felt like she was making a deal with the person who had killed her mentor. In a way she was. That night Martha Chin called her. I heard you're working with Holt Properties, Martha said quietly. Sarah, what are you doing? Sarah closed her eyes. I'm finishing what Robert started. Robert wanted justice, not revenge. Do you know the difference anymore? After the call ended, Sarah sat in the dark for a long time. She thought about Robert, who had always believed in doing things the right way. She thought about the line between justice and revenge, and whether she had already crossed it. But she also thought about Marcus Holt's smile, so confident and unconcerned. He had destroyed a good man and never lost a night's sleep. Sarah made her decision. She would see this through, even if it cost her something precious. Sarah's first week at Holt Properties revealed a system more corrupt than she had imagined. The Columbia City project was supposed to include affordable housing units, a requirement for the tax breaks Holt was receiving. Sarah discovered that the affordable units were designed to be so small and poorly located within the building that no family could actually live in them comfortably. It was compliance on paper only. She found emails between Holt and a city inspector arranging flexible interpretations of fire safety codes. She discovered that contractors were being paid partially off the books to avoid proper insurance and worker protections. Every day, Sarah documented everything carefully. She made copies of files, took photos of documents, and recorded conversations when legally permitted. But she also did her job honestly. When she found safety violations, she reported them internally and insisted they be fixed. To her surprise, Holt actually implemented some of her recommendations. Not because he cared about safety, but because he needed her stamp of approval. Sarah realized she was being used to legitimize a corrupt project. But she was also using him to gather evidence. The moral weight of her position grew heavier each day. One afternoon, she met with the lead architect on Holt's team, a young woman named Jessica Park. Jessica was talented but clearly exhausted. Can I ask you something? Jessica said during a coffee break. Why are you really here? Everyone knows Holt's reputation. Someone with your credentials doesn't need this job. Sarah considered lying but found she couldn't. Someone I cared about was hurt by this company. I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen to others. Jessica nodded slowly. My uncle owned a small construction company. Holt Properties hired him for a project 3 years ago, then refused to pay the final invoice. Said the work didn't meet standards, even though the inspector had approved everything. My uncle went bankrupt fighting the lawsuit. Sarah's chest tightened. I'm sorry. There are a lot of stories like that, Jessica said. But Holt always wins. He has lawyers, money, connections. People like us can't fight people like him. That evening, Sarah added Jessica's uncle's story to her growing file of Holt's victims. She had found 12 similar cases. Contractors unpaid, partners cheated, communities deceived. Each one was carefully structured to be legally defensible, even if morally bankrupt. But Sarah also noticed something important. In several cases, Holt had committed fraud. He had knowingly submitted false information to the city, falsified inspection reports, and misrepresented building specifications to investors. These weren't just ethical violations. They were crimes. Sarah began to see a different path forward. She didn't just want to delay Holt's projects or cost him money. She wanted to expose the entire system and hold him legally accountable. But to do that, she needed irrefutable evidence. And she needed to be careful. If Holt discovered what she was really doing, his lawyers would destroy her before she could act. Sarah worked late that night, organizing her evidence into a detailed report. She documented every code violation, every falsified record, every unpaid contractor. She was building a case brick by brick. But as she worked, she caught her reflection in her computer screen. She looked harder than she remembered. More calculating. Was this justice or obsession? Was she protecting others or feeding her own need for revenge? Sarah didn't have an answer, so she kept working. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening in March. Sarah was reviewing financial documents for the Columbia City project when she noticed something odd. Holt Properties had taken out a large construction loan from Pacific Northwest Bank, but the loan amount didn't match the project's stated costs. She dug deeper, cross-referencing public records with internal documents she had access to. What she found made her heart race. Marcus Holt was running a sophisticated financial scheme. He was inflating project costs to banks to secure larger loans, then using the extra money to fund other projects. Each development was secretly subsidizing the others in a complex web of debt. It was a house of cards. If any single project failed to sell quickly or went significantly over budget, the entire structure could collapse. And Sarah had just found the weakest card. The Columbia City project was already 3 months behind schedule due to Sarah's own legitimate safety recommendations. Holt had borrowed $22 million based on projected completion by September. If the project wasn't finished and selling units by October, he would default on the loan. And there was more. Sarah discovered that Holt had personally guaranteed the loan, meaning his personal assets were at risk. If he defaulted, he wouldn't just lose the project. He could lose everything. Sarah sat back in her chair, stunned by what she had found. She could destroy Marcus Holt completely. All she had to do was delay the Columbia City project by 1 more month. She could find legitimate code violations, request additional inspections, demand safety improvements. Everything she did would be legal and justified. Holt would default. His empire would collapse. He would be investigated for fraud. He would lose everything, just as Robert had lost everything. Sarah's hands trembled as she printed the evidence. But then she noticed something else in the files. The Columbia City project would house 240 families when completed. It included a community center that local residents had been requesting for years. Yes, Holt was profiting from it, and yes, his motives were selfish. But real people were also waiting for these homes. If she caused the project to fail, those families wouldn't get housing. The community center wouldn't be built. And the construction workers, many of them supporting families, would lose their jobs. Sarah thought of Jessica Park and her uncle. She thought of all the people Holt had hurt. Didn't they deserve justice? But she also thought of Robert Chen. What would he tell her to do? She remembered something Robert had said years ago. Our buildings outlive us, Sarah. Make sure they're something you're proud of when you're gone. Sarah made 2 copies of all the financial evidence. One she put in a safety deposit box. The other she took to an attorney who specialized in fraud cases. "I need your advice," she told the lawyer. "I have evidence of fraud, but I want to handle this correctly. I don't want innocent people hurt." The attorney reviewed the documents carefully. "This is serious. If you report this to federal authorities, there will be an investigation. It will take time, maybe a year or more. But if the evidence holds, Marcus Holt will face criminal charges." "What about his active projects?" Sarah asked. "They would likely be placed in receivership and sold to other developers to complete. The workers would keep their jobs, and the buildings would still be finished." Sarah felt something release in her chest. There was a right way to do this. Not revenge. Justice. "I want to report it," Sarah said. "But I need to do one thing first." Sarah spent the next 2 months working harder than ever before. She reviewed every aspect of the Columbia City project, finding and fixing genuine safety issues. She pushed Holt's team to improve the affordable housing units, making them actually livable. She insisted on better worker protections and proper contractor payments. Marcus Holt was furious at the delays and costs, but Sarah's reputation and contract gave her leverage. She threatened to withdraw her endorsement if her recommendations weren't followed. "You're costing me a fortune," Holt snapped during one meeting. "I'm making sure this building is safe and ethical," Sarah replied calmly. "That's what you hired me to do." What Holt didn't know was that Sarah was also preparing a detailed report for federal investigators. She documented every fraudulent transaction, every falsified record, every code violation he had knowingly approved across all his projects. In late May, Sarah submitted her report to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and the U.S. Attorney's Office. She also did something else. She contacted every contractor Holt had cheated, every community he had deceived, every worker he had exploited. She helped them organize their complaints and evidence. She connected them with attorneys willing to work on contingency. Sarah was building a case that was about more than just Marcus Holt. It was about changing a system that allowed people like him to succeed by hurting others. The investigation began quietly. Federal agents started reviewing records. Subpoenas were issued. Holt's attorneys noticed the scrutiny but couldn't yet see the full picture. Sarah knew her role in the investigation would eventually be discovered. She resigned from Holt Properties in June, citing philosophical differences. Holt seemed relieved to see her go. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in Robert Chen's old office, which Martha had kept exactly as he'd left it. "It's going to take time," Sarah told Martha. "The legal process is slow. But Marcus Holt will be held accountable. Not just for what he did to Robert, but for everything." Martha hugged her. "Robert would be proud of you. Not because you brought Holt down, but because you did it the right way." That night, Sarah attended a community celebration in Columbia City. The building project had been completed by a new developer after Holt Properties was forced to sell it during the investigation. The community center was opening. Elena Rodriguez spotted Sarah in the crowd. "You should be up on that stage. None of this would have happened without you." Sarah shook her head. "This was the community's victory. I just provided some information." As Sarah watched families touring their new homes, she felt something she hadn't expected: peace. She had spent 3 years focused on revenge, on bringing down Marcus Holt. But somewhere along the way, her mission had changed. It had become about protecting others, about building something better. A week later, the news broke. Federal investigators had charged Marcus Holt with bank fraud, wire fraud, and falsifying records. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah watched the news coverage with mixed feelings. She felt satisfaction, yes, but also sadness for all the time she had spent consumed by anger. Her phone rang. It was Jessica Park. "I heard about your role in the investigation," Jessica said. "Thank you. My uncle will finally get his settlement." "How did you know it was me?" Sarah asked. "Because I know why you really took that job. And I know you could have just destroyed Holt quickly but chose to do it right instead. That takes someone special. After hanging up, Sarah looked at the photo of Robert Chen on her desk. She had fulfilled her promise to him. But she had done it without becoming like Marcus Holt. She had built her case on truth, not lies. On justice, not revenge. The contract was complete. 18 months later, Sarah sat in a federal courthouse, watching Marcus Holt's sentencing. He had been found guilty on 17 counts of fraud. His attorney argued for leniency, citing Holt's charitable contributions and lack of prior criminal record. The judge was unmoved. "Mr. Holt, you systematically defrauded banks, exploited workers, and endangered public safety for personal profit. You betrayed the trust of your community. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison and order restitution of $14 million to your victims." Sarah felt no triumph, just a quiet sense of completion. Outside the courthouse, several of Holt's victims gathered. Jessica Park's uncle was there, finally compensated for his losses. Elena Rodriguez represented the communities that had fought Holt's predatory developments. "Justice," Elena said simply, and others nodded. Sarah returned to her architecture practice, which she had established during the investigation. She specialized in affordable housing and community-centered design. She worked with neighborhoods to create buildings that served people, not just profits. She also taught, training young architects to prioritize safety and ethics over speed and cost. One evening, Sarah visited Robert Chen's grave. She placed flowers on the headstone and sat on a nearby bench. "I finished it," she said quietly. "But not the way I originally planned. You taught me that buildings need the right foundation. I guess revenge did too. Mine needed to be built on truth." Martha joined her, carrying her own flowers. "How are you doing?" Martha asked. Sarah considered the question. "I'm okay. Better than I was. For a long time I was so focused on destroying Holt that I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Cold. Calculated. Obsessed. But you found your way back," Martha said. "I did. I realized that Robert wouldn't want me to sacrifice who I am just to punish who Holt was. The best revenge was becoming the architect Robert believed I could be. Building good things. Helping people." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over Seattle. Sarah had learned something profound through her journey. Revenge consumed everything it touched. But justice, real justice, built something better in its place. She had spent 3 years planning Marcus Holt's downfall. In the end, she had achieved it not through deception or cruelty, but through patience, truth, and the law. The contract of revenge had transformed into something more meaningful. A commitment to change the system that allowed people like Holt to thrive. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from a community group in the Rainier Valley neighborhood, asking for her help reviewing a new development proposal. She smiled. This was her real work now. Not tearing down corrupt builders, but supporting communities in protecting themselves. Teaching others what she had learned. Creating a better foundation for the future. As she left the cemetery, Sarah realized she was no longer the person who had stood in the rain at Robert's funeral, burning with anger and pain. She was someone who had learned that the strongest structures aren't built on revenge. They're built on purpose, integrity, and hope. And those are the buildings that truly last.